Okay, so here we have our work for Thursday. This is page 8, and this is a review of subtraction. And here on the top for our review exercises, you're going to have a combination of addition and subtraction. So make sure that you are paying attention to the symbols. And the only difference between our subtraction review from yesterday and today is this one says subtraction with zeros, which means we're going to have to do a lot of borrowing because you cannot subtract from 0. So after you complete your speed drills of the day and your review exercises, you will do again both samples here and then start with one in your answer column here. So just a reminder, because we have to do a lot of borrowing, I'm going to do the second sample with you because there's multiple zeros, just to give you a reminder about what to do when you have multiple zeros and you cannot borrow from a 0. So here for our sample, we have 300 minus 167. So just like we always do, we're going to start with the right. And this says 0 minus 7, but that's impossible. So we look to our friend next door to borrow. However, this friend does not have anything to borrow from. So what do? Well, that means we have to go next door again. So once we finally reach a number that we can borrow from, we will take 1 from that. So we'll change the 3 to a 2. And then we're going to make the second number into a 10. That means we can't forget about this number. We have to add it here. That means we don't borrow from here and then go all the way back to the right. So since we had to go 2 over, we change the 3 to a 2, make this a 10. Now this 10 is big enough to borrow from. So we're going to cross out the 10, borrow 1, so we'll make this a 9. And then finally, we can make our last number 10. So then we have 10 minus 7, which is 3, 9 minus 6, which is 3, and 2 minus 1, which is 1. So I'm going to do one more example just in case. I'm going to go ahead and do number 2 with you guys. We have 300 minus 76. So we cannot take 6 from 0, so we have to borrow from the friend next door. The friend next door does not have enough, so we have to go 1 more. We take 1 from the 3, make it into a 2, make this a 10. Now we can borrow from the 10, so we cross out the 10, turn it into a 9, make this a 10. So now we're able to do 10 minus 6. 10 minus 6 is 4, 9 minus 7 is 2, and then 2 minus nothing is 2. So just remembering, you can't borrow from a 0, you have to just keep borrowing, just keep going to the left until you find the number you can borrow from. So for this week, what I'm going to do is, instead of giving a new page for Friday, what I'm going to do is leave this page for Monday because there is quite a bit of review work for the week. So for Friday, we are going to just leave pages, let's see, we started on page 5. So you're going to go back to page 5 and just review pages 5 through 8, making sure that you understand everything, that everything is finished, correct anything you think might be wrong, and then just use Friday as a review. So normally you will have 1 page a day, but for this week we're just going to do pages 5 through 8. Here for our language arts assignment for Thursday, August 27th, we have state of being verbs. So we've been learning about many different kinds of verbs. Yesterday we did compound verbs, and today we're learning about state of being verbs. And we have a few examples here. These are the ones that we most commonly use. So, am, is, are, was, were, be, being, and been. A few verbs do not show action. They simply say something about the subject. They are called state of being verbs. Memorize this list of state of being verbs. When you see one of these words in a sentence, it will always be the verb. So these are a few exceptions to action words. It's where you are, or how you're doing, where you've been, and we will have some examples below. So for think A, it says to underline the verbs 2 times. Are any of them action verbs? So here we're going to look for state of being verbs. So we can just look here at this little chart. But there might also be some action verbs, and that's what we're going to look for. So for number 1, for example, it says, I am the light of the world. So here we notice that there is a state of being verb, and it's am. So you would underline am 2 times. And we'll do one more. Leah is very happy with her new shoes. Is a state of being verb, so we would underline it. You're going to do this with all of these sentences, finding the state of being verb, and also if you find any action words. Then for write B, it says write a verb in each of the following sentences. In the blank before the number, write action or being. So what you're going to do is you're going to come up with an action verb or a state of being verb, and you're going to insert it in these lines. After you do that, you're going to say whether it was an action verb or a being verb. So just to give you an example, for this first one here, it says, Mr. Enders blank a story about colonial days. So if we were to try and put any of these verbs in here, like Mr. Enders a story about colonial days, that doesn't make sense. Mr. Enders is a story about colonial days? No, it doesn't look like any of these state of being verbs are going to make sense here. So let's try an action verb. Any one we want. Let's try told. Mr. Enders told a story about colonial days. That makes sense. And that's an action verb. So you would write told, and over here you would write action. You could even say, Mr. Enders tells a story about colonial days. That is also an action verb. So you may come up with something different than somebody else. You're going to do this for 1 through 9. Then you have page 10 for Thursday. And here we have helping verbs. We use helping verbs all the time when we speak, so it's important to learn them. And although the book goes very quickly, you may be coming back to these pages to help you remember the kinds of verbs that you are using. So here for helping verbs, it says, the following sentences sound strange because something is missing. Can you think of a word that would make each sentence complete? So before you even learn some helping verbs, you're going to go ahead and try to fill in these sentences by words that you think make sense. So for the first one, it says, grandmother blank come to visit us for the holidays. The squirrels blank scampering and frolicking in the orchard. So what word do you think you could fit here to make it make sense? You can say something like, grandmother will come to visit us for the holidays. Grandmother might come to visit us for the holidays. Those are examples of helping verbs. And let's check if those two words that I suggested are in our boxes down here. So for our helping verbs, I chose will, and we do have will here. I chose might. We do have might here. So these are very common, and you might be able to come up with helping verbs easy on your own. The sentences need helpers for the verbs. Grandmother might come to visit us for the holidays. The squirrels are scampering and frolicking in the orchard. So sometimes when you're trying to say an action, it needs a little helper, otherwise it doesn't make sense. You wouldn't say the squirrels scampering and frolicking. You have to add are. So these are the words that help. Some verbs, especially verbs that end in en and ing, cannot do the job of a verb by themselves. They need a helping verb. Read these sentences. The helping verbs are in dark print. Underline the helping verb and the main verb 2 times. You may stand up. Taylor has gone to the library with her brother. We will jog for 15 minutes today. I can finish my work by supper time. Kevin is practicing the piano. The twins have eaten all the apples. So all you're going to do is underline the helping verb and then underline the main verb that it's helping. So to do that, we already know that the helping verb is bold. So all you have to do for that is just underline it. But what verb is it helping? Usually it's the word right next to it, the action word. So you would underline the word may and then underline the main verb stand 2 times. So may once, stand twice. You're going to do that for these sentences here. Now here it says to memorize these verbs. You don't have to memorize them today, but it's important that you look back and remind yourself of what these verbs are, because as we go along in our book, you may have to remember them. Sometimes I like to just fold the corner of my page with the helping verbs because you might need to go back later on in different chapters. And here for your 4th day of spelling, it's actually your last day of spelling book work. Tomorrow you will have a different activity. So because there's always 4 pages of spelling every week, on Fridays I give a special activity or an online quiz. This week it will probably be definitions and another activity, but always on the last page of each lesson, we usually have a story that you have to fill in the words. Sometimes you have to edit an essay, sometimes you have to decide whether a word is spelled correctly, but for today you are just completing each sentence using your list words. Now what I like to tell my students is if they're having a hard time reading cursive right now, you can just flip your page like this so that you can easily see the words in regular print, and then you don't have to worry about reading cursive. So what I'm going to do is actually read the story to you. In class, normally you would help me read it, but if you're having a little bit of trouble reading certain words, I would like for you to listen to the story. Now, I'm not going to tell you all of the answers, but I may tell you one just so you get the hang of it. So on the very top, it explains, it says, Tanya is studying mountains and sent a descriptive email to her cousin Bree. Choose a list word to complete each sentence. Write each word below. So notice it says list word. That means we're not only using the pattern words, we're using all of them. So we need to look at this entire list to find the words that may fill in the sentence. Or, like I said, if you're having trouble with cursive, you could just flip it. So it says, Dear Bree, today I learned about tall blank and how they are formed. Did you know that God created Earth in such a unique way that mountains can be formed in 3 ways? The most blank method of formation is by movement of plates in the Earth's crust. The European Alps, Rocky Mountains, and Himalayas were formed this way. The next type of mountain formation comes from volcanic activity. Melted rock slowly cools and forms blank rock. A familiar type of igneous rock is blank. The third type of mountain formation happens through the sculpturing process by natural forces such as water, wind, or ice. This process is known as blank. Strong winds, powerful rain and waves, or expanding ice can blank underlying areas of rock and create low mountains. I plan on visiting Pikes Peak this weekend with my family. Pikes Peak is a mountain in the Rocky Mountain Range that rises above the city of Colorado Springs. Because of the high altitude, it will be blank, so I will make sure to wear warm clothes. During the winter, the peak is blank and beautiful. I will email you some pictures after visiting the mountain. Isn't it amazing how God created Earth? He is truly powerful. Talk to you soon, Tanya. So just as a first example, it says, today I learned about tall blank. So based on everything that you've read and these pictures and the subject, what word do you think goes here? I can assume that the word is mountains. So we just use clues based on what we're reading to help us decide which words are missing. We have 8 words here that are missing. When you are done writing in these 8 words, what you're going to do is to write the words down here that you used. So here are 1 through 8. So the words you used here, you will write them down neatly down here.